Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. And welcome to the Inbound Lunch Bunch for October. Hopefully, some of you are not having a late lunch. I realize it's a little bit of a misnomer since we moved it. But this month, we'll be talking about using banner ads to attract customers. So hopefully, you kind of come away with a couple of ideas to get inspired by, and using banner ads to promote your messaging and your programs. So a little brief introduction about myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Manisha Mangus. I'm the Director of Consulting here at HighRoad Solutions. My background is in digital marketing. I worked for a number of years in the association market, specializing in lead gen programs, as well as field and social media marketing and change management as well. So I have a lot of experience in helping organizations figure out ways in which to promote their products and their programs and their services in a way that collects additional insights and is effective in generating leads. So we're always looking here at HighRoad for ways in which to connect. So certainly feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or Twitter if you have any questions or if you have any topics on other things that you'd like to kind of see us talk about. Well, certainly we welcome that feedback and interaction. So a couple of housekeeping items specifically for this particular session. If you have joined us before in the past, you'll know that we have a ton of resources available for you on demand. So I would highly encourage you to download our resources and download and listen to some of the other previous sessions that are available. They're all recorded online and searchable. Also, what's really handy is the toolkits that we offer as well. If you haven't signed up for the Toolkit of the Month, I strongly suggest you do. For a marketing practitioner, they are super handy because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can really kind of take the templated format of these toolkits that are provided to you and kind of take them and run with them and be more effective because you don't have to spend time creating them. If I suddenly drop off the call, just hang tight, I'll dial back in. So far, I've been having good luck with Zoom, but just in case that happens, don't worry. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat window. I'll either pause kind of whenever I see them or I'll answer them as soon as I'm able to once we kind of get through the session. Okay, so this is Inbound Lunch Bunch. So, we always start with the inbound refresher, right? So for those of you who are not so familiar with it, or those of you who are practitioners of inbound marketing, remember inbound marketing and methodology was created by a company called HubSpot, right? So I think now in the market today, you're probably hearing the concept or the term inbound marketing just kind of thrown down there saying it covers a lot of things. But let's remember, it came from HubSpot specifically. They coined that methodology by simply kind of taking a couple of long-standing kind of content strategy, more marketing strategy, and overlaying them, creating a methodology around them, right? So often the framework is built on a couple of things. One is content marketing strategy, digital marketing as well, and integrated marketing campaigns, right? So what they've done is it's a really kind of smart way to string things together and to make it kind of very easy to follow kind of from an executional standpoint. So our core pillars, if you will, of the inbound methodology are around attracting people, connecting them, engaging them, and delighting them, and it's a constant circle. So obviously this works really well, especially for associations who are kind of in the business of attracting and then really kind of focusing on engagement and delighting, right? So what we've seen kind of today in the market is that associations have pretty much locked down the engage and delight part, right? You have a ton of programs in which you get your members interacting with you and heavily engaged with you. They can become, by extension, your brand ambassador. So you've got that retention model down really well. The acquisition piece is a piece that most associations today are either faced with doing, they've suddenly been tasked with doing that when they haven't in the past, or they're struggling with it because they're trying to get to that. Right? So the inbound methodology is about taking everything all together. And that's often kind of, extrapolated up to what we call marketing automation, which is really kind of putting everything through a funnel and really doing the acquisition plus the retention piece. Right? So today, our topic is using banner ads to attract customers. So banner ads, the use of banner ads, right, they kind of cover in our methodology the attract and the connect segments, or those pillars, right? And so we really want to get in front of strangers, we want to get in front of visitors, and we want to get in front of leads to push them down that marketing funnel. right? So there are a number of ways in which you can do that. You can use all your vehicles that are there, and really want to leverage all those vehicles and all those different kind of marketing pieces, if you will, to put banner ads, kind of superimpose banner ads on top of that and get in front of those people, right? So that's really kind of what we're going to talk about today. Another thing I want to walk everyone through and make sure you kind of think about this, right? So this is something you may have seen in some of our other presentations as well. So we're calling this is our Smart MarTech stack. This is our marketing technology stack. So we often do a couple of exercises with our clients and with those who are interested in marketing automation as a whole to really kind of talk about your stack or see if you can draw it, right? So back in the day, and this isn't too far ago, this isn't too long ago, maybe up to 5 years ago, when you were asked to draw your marketing tech stack, right, your marketing technology stack, you drew it from the perspective of IT, right? So you as a marketer, even you as a marketer, drew the AMS in the middle, you drew kind of a big circle for your website, you drew a smaller circle for your social media if you were even using it, and then you drew kind of like your email marketing kind of piece kind of in between. All right, so what's changed in all of this is a lot of things, right? One is the market itself. Everything has kind of changed to be around the user. And this is kind of why we heavily emphasize kind of, the power of you, the user centricity, HighRoad view. It's all about that user and that user experience. So in our representation here, we've moved to the model where the user is actually driving everything we do, right? So we want to know about their preferences, specifically, what do we know about them? What do they prefer? What kind of day? How do they operate inside of their day? When do they consume our materials and all of our information products that we put out there? It's really about their own buying behavior, and so they really get represented in the middle. And then we've got our actual technology pieces around there, pushing things through. Right, so in this model, right, the AMS is on the side feeding information and the website's on the side feeding information, but it's really kind of putting it out there in a different format. So when we're thinking about inbound methodology, as well as the kind of the technology pieces and how they fit together, we really want to think about, what makes the most sense, right? And so you're definitely going to see, and you probably are experiencing this in your own organizations, where we are moving from that data-driven organization to the insight-driven organization, right? So you've got data. The data, is passive. It's kind of discrete data that you're trying to make connections to, and you're trying to move towards that insight-driven to say, this is where I think I'm going to be in the future, right? This is where I think my user is going to be in the future. So why don't I get there ahead of time and wait for them? Right, and so this kind of ties back together with banner ads because, again, you're really looking to expose your organization to a set of people who don't necessarily know anything about you. And that's the real kind of challenge for organizations today. So just to kind of level set, we're thinking about what are banner ads. They're online advertising. People have a certain perception, if you will, of banner ads in general. They are definitely a revenue generator for associations, and mostly because if you probably have a banner ad program running, you are kind of exposing your universal reach, right? If you have a list of 20,000 or so, you're exposing that reach to generate revenue for your partners, for your vendors, right? So, what comes rolled in or bundled in with that banner ad program is likely a reluctance to leverage it for association programs, and that's what we see. We see that organizations have banner ad programs, but very rarely do they leverage them to promote their own internal programs, right? What we also see is that there's a trend of moving from banner ads that are static to things that are a little bit more dynamic or interactive. A banner ad traditionally has been an image that's posted somewhere, and it sits out there for a very long time, almost to the point where people tend to ignore it, they forget about it, right? So you'll definitely see trends in the organization today where context is being put around it. So it's a banner ad, but then, there is some sort of context to it being placed in a place where it might be relevant to what you're looking at. It's no longer kind of, it's a static image that's going to stay and display, you know, visitor annual event when the event is, you know, many months away, right? Or you're looking at a certain section of your website that doesn't have anything to do with the event itself, right? So we're definitely seeing kind of a movement towards becoming more contextual, more sticky, more relevant in that placement of those ads. So those are just some of the things that kind of go hand in hand with banner ads today. So really the crux of the problem or the question here is, why should we use them to attract customers? And the answer is, you know, it can be answered by another question, which is, how else would you get in front of people whose email address you don't know? The email address is unknown, right? So I think we've perfected email marketing from that perspective. But if we don't have their email address, we're really kind of in a bind. We're looking for new people, remember? So as part of the inbound methodology, we're looking to attract and connect with those strangers and those visitors in an effort to move them down the funnel, right? So we really need to be in a position to get in front of those people who may not necessarily know that much about us. So it's really kind of finding the right places in which to be, to kind of flash your advertisement, to flash your banner ad, to get as many impressions as possible. So that comes with the traditional and new model of push versus pull marketing, right? So traditionally in the past, banner ads have been used to push out your message. And as I said, you put it out everywhere as much as possible, but it's with very little context, right? So it's, and it's likely because it was pretty exhausting to get a banner ad created. You have to go through multiple steps to get it. So once you have it, let's keep that into the ground and let's put that everywhere, all right? Versus a pull, which is pull marketing, which is we're creating some value and we're creating some demand by being in the right place at the right time to either remind the person or to remind your customer that you have something for them, right? Or be there when they're looking for you. Right, so we want to strike a balance between both. But the reason we use banner ads is simply to amplify your message and rapidly acquire customers. It is the fastest way to gain visibility and generate exposure for your program or for your association, kind of in that digital world. So what that means is that you have a lot of opportunities for placement. And so a lot of what I'm sharing here isn't anything that you probably don't know. It's just really kind of trying to take it back to a point where you can, as a practitioner, kind of incorporate it into your inbound methodology if that's what you're following. So the idea is to kind of say, you know, if you have banner ads, they should be placed kind of as for maximum exposure, right? So obviously, traditionally, we'll always find them on the website in some capacity. But don't forget about all of your other digital channels that are out there. Right, so there are many opportunities for placement across different locations, right? So if you've got event microsites, if you've got product microsites, any of your digital vehicles that are sitting out there, right, you really have an opportunity to leverage them as much as possible, especially because it becomes relevant when you're doing search, right? For SEO, for search engine optimization and search engine marketing, this really kind of helps to amplify and complement kind of your efforts. Right, so other opportunities are mobile apps as well. If you have a learning management system, there's opportunity for cross-placement there. E-commerce receipts in particular are very handy, right? So of course, by, at minimum, you're probably putting banner ads on as part of your email template when you send out regular communications. E-commerce receipts are interesting because you're able to really get in front of people who may not necessarily otherwise pay attention to your email marketing, right? So e-commerce receipts are considered as what we call transactional emails. Transactional emails, there's no opt-out of that, right? So again, it's an opportunity for you to not completely kind of color outside the line, but really kind of color right up to the edge, right? So you're not technically violating anything by putting a very small kind of subtle kind of call out in your e-commerce receipts, because these are transactional emails that do have higher visibility than, let's say, your regular retention emails. So it's always an opportunity. And then social media platforms such as LinkedIn in particular for associations, we find those to be very successful, mostly because, again, LinkedIn is already kind of branded and it's already setting the expectation that you're getting professional, you're finding professional groups, right? All these people are sharing their information from a professional context. Therefore, one, they've already decided and agreed in advance, right, that they are sharing certain information about themselves. So you don't have to convince them. More importantly, you get to leverage that data. So if they're saying that this is what my education is, this is what my professional interests are, these are the number of years I've had and experience in these following fields, all that information becomes available to you, especially if you're considering some of those sponsored content programs, which again means that you can really tap into data from that insight perspective and start to think about how do you get in front of people using a static ad. So suddenly, if your static ad is in front of people who would notice and they would recognize the value of it and the message would resonate with them, then you're one step closer in that inbound methodology to moving them from being a stranger to a visitor. So when we think about banners, using banner ads, we want you to think about what your blockers are. I couldn't find a better picture, but I think this is appropriate, right? So internally, or just kind of, you know, from that own perception, kind of mentally, just what possibly could block you from moving down this route, right? Why would you not use banner ads? It seems like a no-brainer. It seems like the de facto that you should do by default. We still don't see a lot of organizations kind of doing that, right? So again, some potential blockers could be, you know, you're just simply stuck in creative design. It's too overwhelming. You're not sure what to do beyond putting a logo in there, not sure what kind of content to place on there. You know, so that could be the production, you know, the production standpoint or aesthetic standpoint from that sense. Then it's budget, right? So again, when you think about banner ads, likely you have to pay something to put your banner ad out there to expand your reach. Not necessarily within your own network. At minimum, you should be using all your digital properties, right? But beyond that, you want to get in front of people who don't know anything about you, which means you are going to have to set aside or put together some sort of budget to set aside for your spend, for your what we call the above the line spend. Right? In that, you're probably fighting some internal perceptions of why, you know, we don't do paid advertising. It doesn't provide any sort of return. You know, that's push marketing. We don't want to get, you know, in everyone's face too much, and just, you know, we don't see it as being effective. Right? So those are blockers, which, you know, certainly have some value and have some rationale to them. Right? You know, and so the idea is to kind of counter that with, you know, informing you and getting you inspired to think about, you know, what does that mean? What does that really mean? Right? What can you do to kind of work around some of those blockers and work past or push past those challenges? So from a creative standpoint, banner ad could be anything, right? And don't get caught up in it's got to be the logo, it's got to be text and whatever. It could be an image from a video capture. It could be a video played itself where you can take a little snippet, right? It could be just simply a set of words, right? A play on words, you know, it's a picture, it's something, you know, that conveys some sort of message, right? Whatever it is that you're trying to push. It becomes a lot easier to create a banner ad when you're pushing a specific program, right? Or a specific service versus your organization as a whole, right? So again, think about, you know, if you are going to use banner ads to attract your customers, think about the message and the positioning that you want to do, right? So what you're seeing here are a lot of examples about events, right? Because events are very, again, you know, there's a lot of pressure to get registration in the door. We're always looking for people who have not yet registered with us, who have not yet ever encountered, you know, our event or our organization, right? Because, you know, again, we're looking for revenue, as much revenue growth as possible. So there are a lot of different ways in which you can kind of, again, kind of amplify your message and still make it very specific. The more specific your message is, probably the more successful your banner ad is, because then you can get behind it and really put it in front of context. If you're promoting your organization as a whole, right, that becomes a little bit more difficult, right, from a message standpoint. It's not impossible, right, but you are going to have to brainstorm in a different way, right? So think about those ways, think about those different options that are available to you. Also, you know, I haven't marked it here, but, you know, again, when you're thinking from a creative standpoint, you're going to find that some banner ads will have a lot of text, right? You have to put a lot of text on there to put the context, right? So again, you know, you see a lot of these ads, they're mostly for events. You have, you know, we're trying to put as much information as possible to kind of say that you can attend in person or virtually. We've got a number of credits available to you. Here's where you go. Here's what the date is, right? Things that have to get to that minimum you have to convey, right? So which means that when you are drafting your actual banner ads themselves, pick the sizes that are appropriate. Right, so know that, you know, the 300 by 250 display ad is very popular if you're kind of serving it up in display ad networks, if you're putting it on templates and stuff, right? But from that perspective, your message is pretty limited, right? So recognize that and think about it. But it doesn't mean that you've got one banner ad of one size and that is it, right? The idea is to think of kind of all your different iterations and think about placement for all of them, right? So very much kind of in the same way where you think about placement of channel, you want to think about kind of how your content looks in context for that banner ad itself. So another thing, again, so often you get pushback from is, from a budget standpoint, or it seems very expensive, or I don't know if we want to kind of consider this. I mean, that's usually kind of the big pushback here. What I say is, again, you want to, depending, obviously, the more you spend, the wider your reach. The wider your reach, the more likely, it's a numbers game, right? So the more likely you are able to get hits and people who are to convert, right? So if you are only putting your ad in front of 2 people, you have a 50-50% chance, right? It's split. 2 people is either yes, 2 of those people will convert 100%, or 1 of them will, or none of them will. Versus your pool of exposure goes up if it's 100 people, then you have a higher chance of conversion, right? So very much kind of in the same way. What I like about this, and especially kind of in the world of social media, when you talk about advertising, paid advertising, is that you're always in control. Right, so you get to decide, obviously if it's competitive keywords that you're bidding on or something like that, yes, you'll have to pay more. But if you have all these mechanisms in place, kind of from a technical standpoint, to limit your spend, right? So you can set daily budgets. You can see a slider that says, for $15 more, we will reach 14 more people, things like that, right? So this is an example of an ad on Facebook, right? And they're not very expensive, right? So again, so far, for reaching almost 450 people, I have spent almost $20, right, over the course of, I think it's over the course of 4 days so far, right, and I've set a limit to 7 days, right? So think about it from that perspective. These banner ad spends now are not these massive spends where you sink a lot of money in and then you're not sure what your return is. At any given point, you can always go back and see how you're doing, and you can always adjust as well. It's very much a sliding scale. That's very much the case inside of Facebook as well as inside of LinkedIn. Twitter is the same way, right? So it's not arbitrary. So the power of this is that you really are in control when it comes to choosing your segments, right? So you're not putting it in front of 100 people who are just generic or who are just your friends, right? You're putting it in front of, or you can put it in front of 100 people who are professionals in a particular field and who are based in a certain location, who meet a certain set of demographics and who are following, certain types of interests, right? So if you're putting it in front of 100 of those people, you're more likely to generate exposure and then therefore kind of more likely to lead down that path of conversion, right? So that's how you're going to attract your customers. That's how you're going to attract your like-minded people without having to email them, because you're now suddenly exposing your message in a place where they likely are, and they are probably likely to notice in some capacity, right? So that's the ideal methodology, or that's what you should be aiming for. So now those options for placement options are important, right? So, but kind of at minimum, where should you be placing your banners, right? So this is paid or unpaid, where should we be, right? So the additional kind of opportunities that I had listed before, these are kind of at minimum what we see as general best practices. So if you have a program, or if you have an event, or you have something that you're putting out there, at minimum, you should be, seeding or certainly kind of placing them into your email templates as you push out communications. If you've got a blog and there's a daily notification when someone posts something, either in real time or daily or weekly composition, you should definitely use that channel medium as well. And you've got your website at minimum. So again, think about it beyond the homepage and think about it in context for the other pages that your user might be browsing through. Right, so let's say they have landed on your webpage, they've searched for something, it's either a landing page or they've come to a particular site or a particular web page. What kind of message are you going to put there, and is it in context for what they're looking at? Obviously, you want to leverage social media as much as possible, because again, that's where there's most opportunity to quickly generate exposure, and that's really kind of the difference, right? So putting your banner ads on your website is at minimum what you should do. It's a good best practice. It's a slower build because, again, you are relying on a number of things: direct traffic, right, referrals, right, and then search, right? So from that perspective, search means a little bit of time to be able to index your keywords. And then it's a little passive because you're waiting for your customer to come find you. So it's really why we introduce social media into the mix as well, because we know those are sites where there's likely a lot of activity. There's a lot of exchange of information kind of in real time that happens very rapidly. And so it's a faster way in which to kind of amplify your message and get out there. And then lastly, e-commerce receipts, as I said, right? So it's an opportunity for you to seed your message in there, in a subtle way, still provide the information that the user is looking for, but also kind of generate some additional exposure as well. So some examples of this are, since we're talking about inbound methodology, and this is HubSpot methodology. So these are HubSpot emails where, again, these are blogs and blog notifications going out on a daily basis based on the topics that were posted overnight. And again, just opportunities to kind of cross-promote. So put one in here where, the organization is promoting their own event, right, and traditionally an area that is occupied typically by selling that advertising to another vendor, right? So again, the way your technology is set up or should be set up, it should be set up in such a way that you can change these on the fly, right? The idea and the expectation is not to have these sit for a long time, right? The expectation is that your programs move through, you have a targeted kind of plan in place and targeted time frame in place, and then you kind of move on to the next program. So they're not meant to be kind of evergreen. And the idea behind that is you don't want your user to start filtering out what they're looking at. So if they're reading the email, over a course of time, you don't want them to turn a blind eye to your message because it's always the same banner ad. I know what that is, right? So you want to kind of avoid that. Another opportunity is to put it on your blog, but really think about ways in which you can kind of leverage it. So this is a snow sports industry. They've put two examples here. One is NetSuite, which is their vendor, and the other one is SIA Talk, right, which is one of their programs, right? So what happens is that when you come to their site, depending on who you are, you're going to see a different set of banner ads, right? So it's trying to take something that's traditionally a static image, that's traditionally a static kind of passive message, and really kind of adding some context and some relevancy by understanding who you are. So because I've come here before, because I'm already knowledgeable about the organization, it recognizes who I am from a cookie that was dropped into my browser, and therefore it's going to show me a different kind of banner ad, right? So it's just different ways in which to expose your message to a different set of target audiences. So kind of the key message here and the key point is it's now tapping back into that marketing, that smart MarTech stack. We're tapping back into that framework so that you can leverage the data about that user and then build kind of your user journey or user experience accordingly. So we work in social media a lot because, again, we think it's like one of the fastest ways to get in front of people who don't know you, right? Again, the sponsored content in particular, right? So the sponsored opportunity. So while you have a social media page, you're either on Twitter, you've got a LinkedIn group set up for your corporate, for your corporate identity, you have a Facebook page, right? So those are kind of the traditional organic ways in which to generate that awareness, right? But really, again, you as a marketer, you're looking for those additional targeted audiences. You want to get in front of a specific set of people, and we know that these social media platforms are collecting data that you can use for additional insights, right? So the idea here is that it gives you additional opportunities to extend your reach quickly. And that's kind of the big underlying factor here is that, again, you could do it organically, but likely you're tasked with generating something very quickly, right? So again, it allows you to select your targets based on the data that you're looking at, which is really very powerful. So the nice thing about this is, again, on LinkedIn, you've probably seen this before if you've seen some of my presentations, I like this representation, is that LinkedIn does a really good job of doing sponsored content updates that are rather powerful, right? So you can do a number of things on LinkedIn. You can do text ads, or you can do sponsored content. The sponsored content is usually recommended by LinkedIn just because, again, you're able to get in front of a set of people who spend a little bit more time using the application. The text ads also don't show up in mobile views, right? So if somebody's on LinkedIn using the mobile application, they will not see your text ad. So really, if you are going to invest, if you are going to really consider the time and effort and the budget to go onto LinkedIn and put something up there, I highly recommend that you consider the sponsored content route. So really, it's very similar kind of in concept to any funnel, right? So your customer acquisition funnel, which is what they've listed here, your sponsored updates are all about reach. And that's really kind of, again, the point of a banner ad. Banner ad is to attract customers. It's to expand and get in front of those strangers. And then you can move on to different other aspects of LinkedIn, such as sponsored email, and then, continue to nurture using other organic opportunities, right? But the idea here is that you want to expand your reach as quickly as possible to those strangers who, while they're strangers on LinkedIn, they are familiar to you because there's a lot of data for which you can select, right? So again, you can go into LinkedIn, build a sponsored campaign, and select your groups. You can actually say, this is the educational background I want to put my message in front of. These are, this is what their educational background is. This is what groups, they should be members of the following types of groups or who have expressed a certain type of interest. Those in particular are incredibly powerful, right? Because again, you can't go into a group and then simply say, join my organization, right? That's not going to go well. But if you're able to put some sort of content, right, and it's not an ad per se, it's not a straight up ad, it's actually a piece of content that's treated as a banner ad, if you will, but it's a piece of content that you can link back to your website and therefore hook them and make it more relevant for them. So again, we really kind of like that idea and want you to think about using that as a really good launch pad into sponsored content and into sponsored social media content. One of the things that I'd also like you to think about is retargeting. So you may have heard of this term before. Typically, this gets used in conjunction with your social media sponsored ads, right? So when you're thinking about your entire banner ad program and where are you going to be in the universe and where are you going to get in front of, you're thinking about paid versus unpaid and all your different channels. Retargeting often gets overlooked by associations, but I strongly recommend that you kind of think about it. And the reason you want to think about it is because this gives you the opportunity to get back in front of the people who have visited your site and then left, right? So the concept behind retargeting is that it's a form of marketing in which you target users who've previously viewed your website with banner ads that display on networks across the website, or not the website, the internet. So it's like you're following them, right? So what's nice about this is that it gets your message in front of bounced traffic. So typically, if you are listening to your business analyst tell you about Google Analytics and how your bounce rate is too high and we have to do something about it, the silver lining is that yes, you probably should do something about your bounce rate. You don't want to see it traditionally that high, but there is something you can do about it in the meantime, which is, again, leverage retargeting, so you can get your message and your banner ad in front of those people who've already bounced, right? So if you have that high bounce rate, you might want to consider that. Look up your Google Analytics reports. Always, as a general rule of thumb, we always tell our clients to consider to take the bounce rate with a grain of salt, right? Analyze individually. It's not a number that's that helpful, right? You may have a high bounce rate, but if people are spending more than 2.5 minutes on your page before they bounce, then clearly they're reading the message and they're clearly consuming the information. Also, you may be directing them to a specific page with the specific intent that that's all they need right before they bounce. So again, don't dismiss the bounce rate don't take the bounce rate as like the be all end all. We have to get it down or we have to do something about it. Always consider it kind of in that perspective. What I like about this is that, again, it takes something that's, it is what it is. That's what the bounce rate is, but it takes something in perspective and kind of allows you to work with that, right? So the idea here is to kind of say, if you had 100 people visit your website, roughly 20% of those will convert. They will do what you want them to do, which is to buy something or to read something or to consume, to do something, you know, kind of your end ideal target as part of your user journey. So 2 people will do that, 20% will do that, and then the 98 people will not, they'll leave. Right, so this is an opportunity to get back in front of those 98 people and really kind of remind them of what your message is, right? So it's a little bit different from regular display ad buys because it only targets the users that have visited your site, right? So it gives you a level of kind of control, right? So this is, again, why you don't just do retargeting, right? This is in combination with, in supplement to all your other activities, right? But this is a way to kind of do that catch-all, that umbrella or that net to say, if you did happen to come to our site for whatever reason and then you left rather quickly, right? You didn't do what we wanted you to do. This is a way we can kind of get back in front of you, right? So you want to leverage or think about this because you can target users who have visited your site who are unknown. Other than that, you can create it for a specific section of your site, right? And then you're in control because, again, you're only spending your ad dollars on those people who have previously interacted with your site. So when you're thinking about your budget, you're thinking about what my spend should be. You know, this is something for consideration that you might want to think about. So as I said, how it works is just kind of very simple, right? There's a potential, they find your website, right? Either through SEO, through some sort of direct referral, through something. They land on the web page, they look at something and then they bounce, right? They leave rather quickly without spending a lot of time. So they continue to surf on the internet. They're kind of looking at other things. And then they start to see your ads pop up, right? And so think about it from your own exposure, from your own experience. You'll see these if you're on CNN or Yahoo Finance or whatever, right? You'll start to see these ads about organizations or just companies or something that you may have, you know, at one point taken a look at their landing page, taken a look at a particular page while you're doing a search or something, right? So the idea is to say your ad recaptures their interest, right? It reminds them about something. That's, again, why you go back to design and you think about your controlled message, and your message has to be fairly targeted. You want to make sure that if you're promoting the event, you get those details about the event to them, right? And you kind of remind them. The idea is that, you know, those particular people come back to your site by clicking on that ad, and then they convert, right? So it's almost closing the loop on something that, something that, you know, at minimum should just be covered. Right, so the way data is tracked is that you put a retargeting pixel on your website, and as visitors visit that site, the pixel, that's where the pixel is placed, are added to an audience, and the cookie is dropped. Right, so that audience is then shown your ads as they visit different display networks, right, different sites within your display network, whether you're using, you know, Google retargeting or you're using HighRoad or something like that. Right, the key here, again, right, from that standpoint, is the size of the audience affects the success of your retargeting campaign. If you are going after a very small exposed section, right, if you're only going to expose it to about 150 people, you're going to get a very kind of small rate of return. So again, it's not very expensive to load up these ads, right? It depends on kind of what display network you're using, right? But they're not very expensive to be able to kind of generate exposure and collect exposure kind of in the thousands, right? So you want to get to that number so that you can scale and really kind of collect that information. So once you have that ready to go, right, so then you think about measurements, right? So you always have to go back and say, well, how did I do? And, you know, was it worth it to even actually spend here, right? So there are 2 types of measurements that are for retargeting. It's click-through conversions, right? And conversions that happen as a direct result of someone actually clicking on your ad, right? Or they're view-through conversions. And those are conversions that are attributed to another channel, right? That, you know, at what point, you know, the point at which they were served the retargeted ad. So it's really kind of, again, up to you to decide how are you going to measure the success of your campaign. If you're looking to attract customers, then obviously you want that final conversion. But as you kind of go through that process, you are looking for those impressions, right? Because the more, again, as your message gets exposed to people, the more you have a chance of being able to convert them. Right, so those are kind of some of the measurements that are handy and that come through with retargeting. Lastly, on this particular topic, you may have heard of remarketing, right? Very similar. It's actually Google AdWords. They launched that form of retargeting in their own display network, and they called it remarketing. So very much one and the same. The only difference is that it's through the Google AdWords network, right? So what's nice about Google AdWords is that you can leverage your own keyword list, right? So if you've created your account, you've got your own keywords, and then your display ads actually show up on their display network, and it's at their discretion, right? So using their own algorithm based on your keywords, based on your history, they pick the actual display networks in which their own display networks in which they feel you need to show up, right? So it does a little bit more kind of the targeted heavy lifting for you, provided you've got a good solid keyword list. So I suggest, think about Google AdWords. If you are very active on AdWords itself, that might be an option to explore further. So a couple of things when you are thinking about retargeting in particular. So you want unique banner ads, right? So what's nice about this is that, again, because they are unique, right, you have some more flexibility to be creative. So think about kind of your message and what you want to put on there, right? You need custom landing pages, right? You want to be able to kind of, when you set up your ad and you set up your campaign, you'll be asked, where do you want to send this person to? You really want to send them to a landing page. And again, going back to the inbound methodology in which you kind of send them down the funnel, right? You track them, you give them an offer, they fill out their form, they submit, you get more information. You really want to be in a position to do that, because now you are getting to someone who's highly targeted, who's already seen your general page, right? So at some point, they clearly saw your website because this is how you got back in front of them. So to simply send them back to your website homepage again is not going to be effective, right? So you really want to be in a point to be able to send them to some page or some piece of content that's rather sticky. And thing about retargeting too, aside from traditional ad displays, is that it requires ongoing optimization, right? So that's one of the things that most people fall down on, is that you put the ads, they run there for a while, and then you don't update them with new ones, right? So the general rule of thumb is you want to place between 7 to 12 ads running within a 30-day period is kind of the cadence that you want to hit, right? And so that's striking the balance. The idea is not to have one single banner ad, run through your entire campaign for 60 days, because again, you don't want to breed that familiarity, because they're going to start to kind of filter you out. Right? So again, think about it from that perspective. In some ways, this might be challenging. In other ways, it's actually rather creative. It gives you a little bit more creative license. You could start with one ad, see how it performs, tweak it, change a couple of words, change the design a little bit, and put another one in. Right? You can start to experiment to see which size ads work better. The 300 by 250, most popular kind of small square ad that shows up there, typically on the right, or a skyscraper ad, or a vertical leaderboard ad, right? So you can play around with a lot of stuff, but again, the idea here is that retargeting is not a set it and forget it type of thing, but typically or traditionally from the traditional kind of banner ad display networks, this is something that does require a little bit of follow-up and really thought into how am I going to get those people back to my site, and more importantly, once they're on my site, how do I convert them, right? So you really want to think that through, and that's some of the things that are a little bit different from just a traditional banner ad model. So I thought I would kind of change things up and explain a little bit more about retargeting this time, since I don't see it a lot with organizations, right? You see retargeting does really well. You see it often with, retailers, right? But again, it doesn't mean that organizations and associations can't leverage this as well. I think it would be really effective. And again, specifically for programs where you're trying to drive revenue, you're trying to get in front of people who have, never kind of really interacted with your brand before. It's really an option to think about. But overall, you want to think about, from an inbound methodology standpoint, you want to think about using banner ads to attract your customers, to rapidly amplify and extend your reach, right? To find those customers that are outside of your email sphere of influence. You want to find them quickly so that you get in front of them. Then you want to think about, again, using all your channels. So when you think about integrated marketing campaigns, you want to tap into every single possible channel where you could generate exposure. So if you have staff who interact with kind of outside, actual market-facing or customer-facing or audience-build-facing, customers or audiences, make sure that their email signature has your banner ad for your program, right? So simple things like that, but everything is additive, right? So you want to be able to kind of say that as part of your campaign, you've put feelers out there everywhere for all possible components where you can expose your message. And then lastly, you want to be insight driven to identify your target segments, right? So from an advertising perspective, you're looking to purchase or buy advertising space. Even when you're thinking about just organically where and what your content should be or what your banner ad should be even on your native site, or when you're thinking about retargeting, right? So you want to be very clear on, sure, I'm looking to attract customers, but what do I know about these customers? So remember, try to go back to your MarTech stack, think about the data that you're able to pull from there, think about that user experience and what that user is really kind of looking for, right? So you want to be able to create a meaningful experience and create a meaningful message, but more importantly, you want to be able to identify your like-minded people, right? So if you have to expose your message you have to put your banner ad in front of 100 people, you want to be in a position to put them in front of 100 people that are willing to look at your message or likely to recognize some of the industry terms you're using versus just a general 100 people who happen to, be browsing on Facebook, all generations, all demographics, things like that. So you really want to be in a position where you're looking at your data and meaningfully thinking about, I want these people because they are, they fit this certain age range. I want these people because they are in a certain location geographically, very close to my event, just outside of a city center. Or I want these people because they are part of a certain set of interests. I may not know what specific LinkedIn groups that they're in, but I definitely know, the word should be, they should have taxation in it, right? Or they should have, attorneys. They should be attorneys. They should be chartered accountants, things like that, right? So anything that you can get very specific on, that's really what you want to think about when you're starting to put these programs together. So as I said, I'll just kind of leave it here, and I'll give you guys about 13 minutes back in the rest of your Friday. Don't be afraid to get creative and experiment with your marketing, especially so in banner ads, because again, this is a fast turnaround. If it doesn't seem to work, you can change it up very quickly, right? So what's nice about, being kind of able to tap some of these networks is that once you've got your banner ads, you customize, you tweak them, you put them out there, and then you can see the results roll through pretty quickly, right? So the impressions will start to ratchet up over time, and over time means 1 or 2 days. So, certainly you can kind of see the trend over that time, and then decide whether you want to put more money in to bump up your exposure. Do you want to change the criteria of your segment so that you're getting far more refined? And then, where else can you kind of get exposure? What kind of additional opportunities can you use to put your banner ads in front of other channels and other mediums, right? So there's a lot of creativity here, a lot of flexibility. So you're not locked into anything, and that's really, I think, the big counter for anyone who's thinking that this might be too expensive. I don't have the budget for it. You really want to think of it from that standpoint that you are in control. You can set those limits, but you can also expand and play with them very quickly as well, right? So not too overwhelming, but enough for you to kind of really think it through and think about the ways in which you can kind of put the whole piece together. So that's all I have for today. So thank you very much for joining. I'll leave the line open. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat window. Other than that, have a great rest of the day.